Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Expeditors Podcast, where we look at the logistics and freight forwarding industry through the lens of a global logistics provider. I'm your host, Chris Parker, and today we are discussing how tariffs are shaping the flow of French exports into the U.S. We're also going to learn about what tools and resources are available to mitigate those changes. With me today is Dana Lorenz, our Senior Vice President of Global Customs at the Expeditors Corporate Headquarters, and Mark Rached, Regional Director of France, based in our Paris District Office. Dana, Mark, welcome back. It's good to see you all again. And yeah, are you ready to talk about what's kind of a very interesting topic right now?
Indeed.
Before we get started, how have you two been doing? Mark, let's hear from you. What's been going on since last we spoke? What's going on in your world right now?
Thank you for having us, Chris. Always excited to discuss things that are moving the world other than freight that we are moving. So, things have been going pretty intense. So we've been very busy. We've had the Olympics last year, so we needed to find another occupation. And today we're pretty busy with being with our customers, talking about tariff changes, about sourcing shifting. So it's been exciting.
A lot going on. And Dana, from a global perspective in your world, how's that been? Are you sleeping? Are you getting enough sleep?
I would say I could always use more sleep. I
Yes.
definitely have earlier wake-up calls, mainly so I could keep working out and possibly doing yoga to balance myself, because not so balanced these days. I will say, as a trade practitioner, we're having no end of content and people interested in these topics. So
Yeah.
it's definitely creating some opportunities to get closer with our customers and feeling like customs is absolutely a part of trade in the world.
Yeah, now more than ever. I mean, I feel like that was a lesson that was being learned well beforehand, especially around like stability, around resilience, during COVID and such. And now it's around compliance. It's a very important topic. So let's go ahead and start then with establishing a baseline here. Would you help me understand what is the state of tariffs right now in France when exporting to the U.S.?
That's an excellent question, Chris. I think this is what's keeping our customers pretty busy. The answer has changed throughout the time. So what we knew last year is definitely not what we know today. So there's been a lot of changes. I think one of the complexities is keeping up with all the new tariff announcements that come up. So we have different sectors in France. France is a major trade partner with the US. On top of our exports is the aviation. Then we have the luxury and pharmaceuticals. And each of those industries has a different tariff that applied on imports into the US. And many of those have changed in the past months and still changing.
Dana, let's hear from you.
So my answer is really from a global perspective. And obviously, France is a big exporting country, and the US is a big importing and exporting countries.
Right.
Our countries actually have a lot of trade anyway. So this isn't new, but the complexity and the amount of detail that you need to have further upstream has been something that all our customers struggle with, quite frankly, in that the information at a very in-depth level goes beyond where the goods made and sourced, but by whom and how far up the supply chain can you gather the information that is needed in order to properly declare. So both operations in the US and France are very mature. Our customers are extremely well-known multinationals in a general sense, and they have a history of doing business globally. I think the unique position these days is how much immediate information must be supplied at the time the transaction is taking place and ongoing to support the continuous amendments and changes as the tariff situation continues to progress.
So what kind of trends then are arising out of that? Because, you've established here that trade relationship between France and the U.S. is very stable. It's long storied. There's a patina to it. I would imagine that it's just very predictable in some ways, right? Because it's been so long standing. Is that working against being able to mitigate those changes right now with tariffs? And what are you seeing French companies doing? What positions are they finding themselves in as a result of this?
I'll take a stab at it first, and then I'll pass it to Mark. So from my perspective, again, more global than specific country related, is that because longstanding trade has been in place for years, the rules of interaction and engagement are actually good. I mean, it's not like you're just learning how to do importing and exporting. What the difference is the amount of information that's needed in a particular transaction on one end has multiplied because to prove out an import or export in the past was based off of the same information that's provided today, generally speaking.
Mhm.
The derivative values or the exact sourcing information needs to be more accurate, needs to be more timely, and needs to be more thorough than ever before. And I think the opportunity for that very strong relationship between France and the United States and France from a just customs import perspective, is that the information that we need to validate is just more meaningful at the moment that it crosses the border right now, more than ever.
Yeah, absolutely. Mark, let's hear from you then. Any trends that you're seeing with how French companies are exporting into the U.S. as a result of these tariffs? What's changing? What's been the demands?
The observation is that it's been very dynamic as
Mhm.
changes in the past months. And what the companies are observing is that shift of required expertise. As an exporter, you are required to understand what are the impacts of your imports to the US. And this is something that's been a little bit unusual, and you don't have that connaissance or that knowledge that resides in France to know, hey, how should we adapt as an exporter? What should we do to become a compliant importer? And that information, where the changes and the regulations are shifting and changing rather rapidly, requires the French companies to be very agile and to look for resources that can accompany them in how to process their shipments correctly.
So then, Mark, do you know how that's resulting in strain on French companies? Like, what are they experiencing as a result of that then? The expectations are higher, the needs are higher, the flexibility is higher, but what is it resulting in impact to companies?
The impact on the companies is they have to be agile in their decision making. They have to source internal, external. So companies are now required to decide quickly on their exports to the US, and
Mhm.
they have to source consultancy and seek support in order to adapt to the new regulations in the US.
When I'm hearing between the two of you, it's that these longstanding relationships, they've been stable, reliable. But if that's the case, then wouldn't they be already well positioned to mitigate and to be able to anticipate changes like this? What is really the factor here that's causing such a greater ripple or a greater like concern for companies than it has in the past? When I think of a strong relationship, I think of strong foundation, right? If an issue happens, it can be handled. The house is still strong because it has that strong foundation. So how is that different for right now?
So I think the key differential, Chris, having a mature trade lane, if you will, is beneficial in one way. And then in terms of the house reference that you just made, when you have a house that's strong and you have a storm, you might be able to protect that house by putting on an extra awning or putting a cover up that actually is a more protective coating. I
Right.
would say that what companies are doing right now is that they're really digging into that knowledge-based approach.
Hmm.
Because while knowledge is always valued in general sense, I think that that's a universal thing that, speed and accuracy and knowledge may be understated in what people say they need because
Sure.
you assume that they exist. In times where you require great adaptability in a complex environment with constant change, that foundation not only needs to be unquestionable, but actionable and obvious in a difficult time. And I
Right.
think the challenge to all companies that are in the midst of this trade complexity is that what you used to be able to do over a period of time with some level of grace, you have shorter periods of time and greater needs for change. And
Hmm.
while that tests really experienced folks, in times where companies make decisions to invest in one way or another way, right now we're seeing that the intent to focus on trade is to support really visibility, accuracy, and timeliness.
Hmm.
You don't have a grace period on now. And so
Right.
I think working with trusted partners is the only way There are, of course, and I know you'll ask, technology tools and things that you can do to bolster that up.
Sure.
In addition to all the tools that might be available, you have to start with a framework of knowledgeable expertise.
Right.
Quite honestly, those companies that have invested all these years in compliance and trade knowledge are faring much better. Those
Mhm.
that have not, that are just having to catch up, have to rely on a lot of extra resources in order to make sure that they are on the right path.
Right. Absolutely, absolutely. Mark, anything to add to that? What is the strain that you've been seeing on in your conversations with French customers, but also just like companies in general?
To Dana's point, when customers are really looking to broaden or to increase their expertise in the subject, as said, there's no grace period, there's no trial period. They need to do it now, today, and not tomorrow, and not in 1 week. So, building that expertise has been very important, gathering that knowledge and making sure that it's a sustainable way of approaching the trade changes with the US. Um, some companies have had that maturity
Hmm.
already. They have the infrastructure and they build around it. Some are outsourcing and are looking to have the right resources that can support them.
Okay, so Mark, let's talk about those tools and resources. What would you say is available right now to stay informed and ready and nimble?
The topic has been hitting the news a lot, so there's been a lot of information that's available, whether it is coming from the government entities that's providing more clarity and transparency on what are the impacts of the trade, what are the industries that are impacted. The European Union has also been very active in communicating the recent changes in tariffs that are being applied. So customers are really busy in getting those information, making sure to validate the source of the information and working towards integrating those new changes in their operations.
All right, Dana, what about you? And from my global perspective here, what have you found that has been the most helpful for companies?
Yeah, I think number one is staying informed continuously. And, companies who value it and have an infrastructure have had to even broaden their scope. And I can say we have as well. We have been holding webinars that have like 50,000 people attending them, and they're strictly instructional and educational.
Yeah.
It's not a marketing event. It is literally, here's how you stack the tariffs. Here are the rules that need to be applied. Here's what to do upstream, because we're all figuring this out together. And in that discussion point with an alignment with experts talking to experts, there are sometimes still gray areas. And I feel like trade and compliance are now working a lot more integratedly in companies, whether it's throughout the supply chain, up in the C suite, throughout the logistics realm, or other aspects of the enterprise, that it is not just the customs people that need to be the knowledgeable experts. You need to know how things are sourced. You need to know how they're made. You need to know how you assign a value to things. And that's always been important, but now it's even more critical, and it needs to be done in a level of orchestration that has never existed in a supply chain up to this point.
And with those changes here, like, help me understand a timeline. When do we as a customs broker learn of these changes compared to when a customer would learn about them to tariffs?
Yeah, I think so. There's no end of news. And that's also part of the, I guess, richness of the current situation.
Yeah.
There's also a lot of misleading news, or there's a
Hmm.
lot of interpretation from an announcement to the actual implementation of the rule, to the
Hmm.
clarification of what's needed to confirm that rule. There's just a lot of churn in that area right now. So,
Sure.
a best practice for trade, for our customers, for the industry, for what we're trying to do is you have a group of people that are culling the news, that they're sifting through what's actual fact, and we try to stay away from conjecture, what the new regulation says, and what is evidence of that regulation and action operationally. And I think if we all communicate at that level broadly throughout the organizations in trade, the effectiveness of that and the level of transparency is iterative, quite frankly. And then you learn from that for the
Hmm.
next time there's another trade action. And these are not infrequent now. So I feel like it is just a virtuous cycle, if you will. Maybe,
Yeah.
maybe not always virtuous, but a cycle. And that it is the world that we're living in today. And there's no done in this case. It's sort of
Right.
making sure that you are the right place at the right time for the thing that has happened, and that you're gearing up from a programmatic way, from a process way, and from a communication way. And that's the way I think we all navigate this complexity. At least that's our advice to ourselves and our customers, our employees.
Yeah. Yeah. Wanting to go back to, again, this talk of these tools and resources, Mark, I was really curious to hear what hasn't worked, what is not working for companies, right? They've been so reliant. I mean, hearing from Dana, what you're saying is you need to know what is going on inside within your company regarding your sourcing and such, so that you can have those conversations with your broker, right? And your broker needs to be fluent and needs to be able to interpret the stuff as cleanly as possible, so that fumbles cannot happen down the line. When it comes to avoiding fumbles and other mistakes and such, what has not been working, or what has been most successful right now for French customers?
I think the best scenarios or the best thing is when they don't guess or speculate of what is going to happen, but rather how to deal with those changes, and having an internal structure today that can become knowledgeable, always learning what are the tariff changes, what are the trade changes that are happening. I think one of the good things that is important and that we're seeing also in the shift of behavior is when we have today finance being included in those conversations to see what's the
Mm-hmm.
impact on their budgets, on their sales. So we have more and more people, stakeholders that are coming into play, coming into the picture. We see that there's more and more collaboration with the destination countries, with the broker at destination in taking the right decisions at origin. So it's seeking out the experts in the supply chain at origin, at destination, the transporter, and collaboratively making short-term plan, mid-term plan, and long-term plan. It's all about a what-if scenario. What will happen if such and such changes, or if that changes? So I think this is what's mainly when companies are mostly successful, when they prepare to different scenarios and don't take it just for granted that, okay, we just have to deal with this today. So things are changing fast, and it's that agility that is required today to stay in the market.
So, okay, so then going back to what you're saying about building a short-term, mid-term, long-term plan, what are the mechanisms that are out there right now to assembling these different kinds of strategies?
So if you look at short term, today you have to adapt to the current tariff changes and make sure that you're compliant to whatever those changes are. Then on midterm, short term, what companies are looking for is how to minimize the impacts and how to ensure in a very compliant environment. Developing their knowledge further into what are the trade agreements that exist, how can you benefit? What are some of the elements today that are unknown to them that could be beneficial to reducing the impacts of those tariffs? Would utilizing a free trade zone have advantages for those exporters? Are they really benefiting from all the programs that exist in the US to reduce the impact of duties and taxes?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Dana, what about you? Yeah.
Yeah, so in the past, I think there was an over reliance on very few people that were sort of quiet in the communication front, and that experts just did what experts do, and they do the work and they sort of disappear into the background, generally speaking. I think
Yeah.
in the current environment, what has been made clear is that knowledge in an organization is much more useful when it's collaborative and aligned and not siloed. And that those are just words at this point. But relying on someone else to do your job, or to do the
Mm.
job of a compliant importer or an exporter, that was sort of a previous thought in previous eras. Like, hey, I just rely on my broker. I just rely on
Yeah.
my freight forwarder. And I think the companies that are the most successful are the ones that take an active ownership in that and orchestrate pulling in experts where they need them, utilizing cross enterprise solutions to be able to really drive to not only the benefits that can be gained, but the risk mitigation in trying to avoid the pitfalls, right? And, when I said try to avoid predicting what might happen, I feel like you have to, from a resiliency, assume that there might be multiple scenarios on how it could play out, and being somewhat more adept and flexible in doing scenario planning, but not betting all in on
Right.
scenario over another. So
Mhm.
that takes a level of skill set within an organization that is beyond a one channel mode. And those companies that are truly investing in a partnership with their suppliers and a partnership with their customers and a partnership in understanding the value chain period will be the most successful and going forward. And I feel like lessons that we're going to be learning now will pay off in the future, but the risk is higher if you don't learn the lesson fast.
Yeah, 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 absolutely. Mark, you were talking about the aerospace and fashion industries in France. Like, I just want to get a little bit more of like France, like, just like what is unique about them that makes any of this kind of planning more difficult, if anything.
But for those industries, in particular aviation and high fashion, there's, in a funny way, a sense of urgency in getting those parts and freight to the markets.
Mm-hmm.
So is always speed to market. It has to be there. There's a high demand always for those products. And those companies as well benefit from having that structure today that allows them to service different regions and different markets. There is certain awareness of the complexity of the markets that they need to serve and
Mm-hmm.
agility in which you need to adapt to the rapid changes. Those industries in particular are more equipped today to find the solutions or quickly rather than other industries. What I mean by equipped is they have the infrastructure. They just need to grow that knowledge, grow that expertise within
Right.
their teams.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Well, then last question for you, Mark, and kind of extending off of that was, what kind of internal conversations should teams be having to get more aligned and ready for, the next trade action to come?
Well, understanding that the responsibility is shared across the borders. I think earlier in our days, and especially in France, we would think the job ends of the exporter once it's on board the aircraft or on board the vessel. Things have changed now, rapidly changing, and that responsibility is shared among all parties. So that collaboration, understanding that everyone's responsible for the success of their imports and exports will help definitely create a better alignment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then Dana, I mean, when I was hearing you talking about brokers here, like I'm thinking of, insurance brokers or like life insurance brokers or real estate and stuff. Like when I'm thinking of a broker, I'm thinking that's just someone who will just take my need and they'll take care of it. They'll handle it. I don't need to know more. What I hear you saying is I need to know what's going on that side, right? I need to be talking with my broker more, especially with customs here. I need to know what's going on in order so that I can be ready to change things on my side. What other conversations do you feel like teams should be having to get more aligned and prepare for that next trade action?
I think the upstream awareness is critical,
Yeah,
and relying on expertise is always a good idea, but putting a blind faith that someone else has it without your involvement is probably
not a good idea.
not great business anyway. Becoming more obvious that that's not great business.
Yeah.
But when you were actually talking about brokers, it's funny because customs in the United States, as an example, requires a bond in order to do a significant volume of imports in the US to basically assure customs that the duty will be paid. Those bond saturation levels are happening faster because there is a higher level of duty. And so
Mm-hmm.
that financial impacts to companies is more immediate. And you do need someone anticipating and watching. And there's something different between working with a partner who works together with you or takes 100% ownership for something that is really, really going to impact another company. So, Mark,
Right.
right, is that like it is a value chain, a supply chain in sort of that integration between the links has always been important, but now is critical. And I think
Mm-hmm.
it's also a conduit, right? So what you get on the front end affects the back end, and what affects the back end will help make the front end better in the future. So I think that these lessons are actually oddly positive in some way. And assuming that we all get stronger and that our organizations work better together, that speed to market won't have to be the thing that is risked in doing things accurately and compliantly upstream. So really
Mm.
that methodology actually secures more consistent delivery to customers, more accurate reporting, et cetera, et cetera. So I still am optimistic that navigating this is a challenge, but will be better in the long run.
Cool. Dana, Mark, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me about this. I really appreciate it. Good luck out there. Thanks for everything you do. It really sounds like it's a wild time.
It's our pleasure. We love to talk about trade and supply chain.
And maybe get some sleep too after it. After you've been talking so much about it.
Yeah, exactly.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you've got questions or want to learn more about today's topic, check out the show notes for more information. And before you go, make sure you're subscribed on whatever podcast app you're using so you won't miss the next episode. To learn more about Expeditors, you can find us on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, or simply visit us at expeditors.com. Take care, and I'll see you next time.